Discover with us how to efficiently plan, conduct, and document audits.
All of this in a user-friendly interface that noticeably eases your work. See for yourself.
Welcome to Q.Focus. Topic: Audit Management. I'm glad you are here. My name is Lars von Straelen.
Welcome from me as well. My name is Daniel von Sondern.
Audit Management, the module, has been guiding us for a very, very long time. It is one of the modules that has been part of the Babtec portfolio for years. And within the framework of Babtec's IMS orientation, it has indeed gained more significance. And it has been continuously in demand over the past months and years among our prospects.
To give you an overview of our Babtec portfolio and to place the audit module in the overall context, we have brought along an overview.
With this, we can go to my computer. And here, you see a list of the Babtec modules that we currently offer. Now, today we focus on the audit module. However, the audit module cannot be viewed in isolation. You need to include action management and thus also task management. These 2 or 3 modules are very closely interconnected. The deviations that we will identify shortly will be accompanied by actions during the presentation, and these actions, like every action in Babtec, will go into the central action management.
Classically, I would say, let's get started, launch the audit module, and proceed to the first step, audit planning.
I have now activated the Babtec software, and indeed, we are not starting our presentation with the classic list view of the audits, which of course still exists, meaning this table-based view of the audits that are in the system. But we have already activated the so-called audit plan here. And this audit plan is a calendar view of the audits that are in the system, and each audit that is already created in the system is displayed there in color. And this color, I can enlarge it here, is based on this legend. This legend reflects the different statuses that each audit goes through, from planning to eventually the completed audit and everything in between.
Besides the overview that this view provides me, I can also use this view for navigation if I want to jump into a specific audit, for example, or if I want to get an overview of the key data of an audit through the small mini view on the right side. But now we would also use this view to directly create a new audit here, and we do this on a date we have set.
The first piece of information I need to enter at this point is that what type of audit do I want to create? And we provide 3 standard types. This involves managing, planning, and conducting internal audits. So you audit within your company. It's about managing external audits. You are being audited and may only want to document identified deviations and the associated actions at this point. And last but not least, the supplier audit, which is used to audit your suppliers, identify results and deviations, and possibly document actions in that area.
In our case, we will create an internal audit to then move into the further phases of audit planning. In the first dialog view, we get the basic key data of the audit, meaning when does it start and end. And we can now begin with some detailed planning. Additionally, we offer the possibility to provide your own categories for structuring the audit. This means you have the option to specify the audit type here, as well as to record the audit nature for further progress. And these catalogs that you see here can be supplemented with your own entries to better structure and evaluate them later.
Besides these standard header data that you maintain here regarding audit type and audit nature, there is, of course, another important piece of information: which employees are involved in the audit. And for that, we have the team card index. In this team card index, I'll add 2 entries. You refer back to the users of your Babtec system and link them with the audit. So here, on one hand, the Katrin link, and also Uwe, whom we will assign here.
By the way, the users come from the Active Directory and can be directly imported into Babtec, where you can then individually define user roles and user rights.
By using these user roles and rights, the system can be configured so that only team members can see the audit in which they are members. This allows them, for example, to maintain management audits in Babtec and really restrict visibility only to team members, so that access by unauthorized persons is simply excluded, as they do not even appear in the audit list.
Okay, we have now defined the audit. Now it's about determining what the content of this audit should be. And you add the content in Babtec using a wizard by accessing existing question catalogs.
These question catalogs we have here are based on so-called templates. These templates, as you can see, are available in both German and English. And it is a catalog of templates that we provide to you, from which you can select which question catalogs should be used in your system. For the start, at this point, we select the classic, the .9001 audit, and thus add the audit structure with the questions to this individual audit. You can see this here on the left side. Now, the first structure has been created, which reflects the content of the audit.
The structure that we have now imported here can, of course, be changed further during the planning process. That means I can now go ahead and say, although I have a 9001 audit, I might also want to include additional elements from the 14001. In this case, I can combine question catalogs using the assistant. I am now calling up this assistant.
I see the audit structure displayed on the right side, which currently exists. You can see that it is already pre-filled, and I have the option to open additional templates on the left side. And here, for example, I am using the 14001. Within this 14001, I refer back to chapter 6.2. So I want to also consider this environmental topic. And this environmental topic should be integrated into chapter 6 of my existing audit. By clicking on the transfer button, you can see that this environmental topic is now also copied into the audit we are currently creating.
After you have adjusted the structure, either through the combination with another questionnaire, which could also be a different standard questionnaire, or a custom-created questionnaire, you can also manually make changes to the structure. Of course, I can go ahead and reorder chapters, manually remove chapters from the audit, or even add individual chapters or questions. So that you don't have to redo this for planning next time, you can now save your completed inventory structure as a template for easy reuse.
Now that we have structurally created the audit, content-wise, meaning we have thought about what should be audited, we move on to the detailed planning. And one of the most important aspects of detailed planning at this point is, of course, who should do it and when it should be done. How does that work? How do I proceed, Daniel?
The simplest way would be to assign the main auditor at the top of the catalog. This way, he takes responsibility for all individual points of the audit, and then you go ahead and pick exactly the topics in the audit that you want to assign to other responsibilities. That means you take one or two individual chapters and change the person responsible there.
Let's do exactly that together. We'll go back to my computer. What you mentioned, I go to the head level of the audit, and at the head level, at the top level, I now say, okay, I want Katrine to be entered as the auditor for the entire audit first. And Peter should be used as the contact person. I save that and have now copied this information into all chapters that have been created within the audit so far. You can see that quite well. So if I select chapter 4 in the tree structure, then you see Katrine is assigned. I open it up and go to chapter 4.1. There too, as expected, Katrine is assigned. Now, perhaps I don't want chapter 4 to be audited by Katrine. Then I select the top level and overwrite the current entry. And I say, yes, Uwe should do that, please. And as the contact person, it's not Peter involved, but Arwin should do it.
We would skip the detailed planning for individual days or time slots now, but it is certainly possible for each chapter here. Now it becomes more interesting because I might have completed the audit planning both broadly and in detail. And now I want to communicate this structure with the responsibilities. For that, we can use some of our standard reports.
Standard reports are hidden behind the printer icon. And just like in other Babtec modules, we also provide various standard reports. And what we want to introduce to you now is the audit plan. As soon as I open the audit plan with a double click, I enlarge it a bit, then you can see it. In the upper area, I see the master data again. I see the audit team that is assigned. And here in the lower area, the information that Arwen is responsible for Chapter 8. And here in the lower area, Peter and Katrin take care of the audit starting from Chapter 5.
You can, of course, export these reports as a PDF file, Word, or Excel file. You can freeze them in their current state and save them in the database, or send them via email using your standard. Send directly as an attachment to interested parties using email clients. Again, the option to convert everything into PDF, Word, TIO, or Excel.
Now, let's assume the planning is really complete, and I also want to enter this status change within the Babtec software. Then open the context menu with the right mouse button. And I will actually skip the completion of the planning process and switch directly to the execution mode of the audit. This mode that we have here is visualized directly in the audit. You can see it here in the upper area. It is shown again that the audit, this internal audit, is now in execution mode and can be evaluated.
In execution mode, we now look at the individual topics in detail. For example, directly the first question. Here we can jump to the detailed view of the question. On the one hand, we can look at the explanation as well as the individual question. In the lower area, I then have the option to evaluate this question separately. That means in our example, we now have a scale stored that has different values, and we would now assign the 10 points. Of course, there is also the possibility to use other types of scales. For example, the option of just a green thumbs up, a red thumbs down, or your individual scale that you require today.
This activity, evaluating the individual question step by step, is of course available to you. But the audit today is no longer conducted by asking question by question, but rather has more of an interview character. That means you engage in a dialogue with your audit and keep this dialogue in mind. You have the structure and answer your questions step by step. And in this interview, it is usually the case that a large part of the requirements defined here as questions are answered positively. And to avoid disrupting this interview flow by having to make inputs repeatedly, you have a function in Babtec. I'll call it up, where you can say yes. This chapter 4 that I have here, with a right click, I want to fill it completely with the standard evaluation. If I select this now and say yes here, you will see that the entire chapter, or 4, is marked with 1 green mut satisfactorily answered questions.
I know you are a positive person and everything here is beautifully green, but occasionally there are cases where we might find something where the requirements are not fully met. Therefore, we would now take out a question and rate it lower or even evaluate it with the worst case scenario of 0 points.
I will do that now. So I have rated my 0 points here, and now something interesting happens directly in this tree structure. I'll make it a bit larger for you. You can now see that this red-rated question area directly leads to this chapter being rated yellow at the top level. So here, the degree of fulfillment for the chapters, sub-chapters, but of course also for the top areas of the audit is calculated live and visually represented with colors.
For a question that we now rate with 0 points, we will also record a deviation. This deviation can be directly attached to the question via right-click through the context menu. In this case, the deviation must definitely be specified with a deviation type, whereby we access the catalog of existing deviations. In addition to these standard specifications, individual solutions are of course also possible for naming such a deviation. In any case, the short sector deviation is still to be filled in as an additional mandatory field here. Then you can of course describe the deviation in detail using the free text or support the deviation with other media, for example, documents, or as in this case, simply images of the incomplete organizational chart.
Let's assume that with that, the audit is completed. You have asked all the interview questions, thereby answering your questions in the background, and have not identified any further deviations. So that with a simple mouse click, we can just say, yes, I would like to apply the standard evaluation for the entire audit. And voila, all other questions are highlighted in green with this one deviation that we have documented here.
Lars, now we have completed the audit. What does an overall result look like at the end? How can I display it and above all inform other parties about it?
Now the reporting comes into play again. That means the reports, the PDF documents, Excel lists, and so on that we can generate. We will bring them out again now. Here we are again. And now I can retrieve the reports on my computer using the printer icon, which we deliver as standard. And you said you would like to have an overview about the degree of fulfillment at this point, so that we can look at a report here which very strongly visualizes the degree of fulfillment of the audit in tabular form.
Here I can see for each individual topic, which I have presented here as an audit chapter, the individual degree of fulfillment, whether there were deviations, and even whether measures have been initiated up to the current status.
I will now address the topic of measures. Of course, measures are a topic that usually come into play later after an audit and after dialogue with your audited team. But of course, we still want to show them the measures management so that we can we will show it so that you can engage in dialogue with your audit. You can do this within the Babtec software. In the lower section, display the deviation, all deviations that are defined. And with a double click, I now jump to the deviation.
Now we attach a new measure directly to the previously recorded deviation within the audit structure.
I select the measure from my audit catalog using working documents. And I have the option to provide more information to the assignee via free text about what exactly needs to be done. I assign this measure to Katrin and give her until the end of the year to complete it. And I also document that it is an internal planned measure.
Now the contact person or the person responsible for this measure has different options. A, to be notified, and B, to work through this measure. One option would be, of course, if Katrin were now a Babtec user, to simply open the action management and look for the measure that is relevant to her. Ideally, she would use a dashboard where she can access it and directly see the number of measures she is responsible for by the end of the year.
Another way is for her to be actively notified that there is a new measure. And this active notification, well, what comes to mind? Email functionality. We have introduced this as a method. That means I now switch to my email client, need to say send and receive here once. And the measure that I need to complete is already sent to me via email. You can see again that I have entered the measure here that Katrin has until the end of the year to complete it. And the triggering record here was the audit team.
Here we offer the employee considers two options to respond. The upper link takes them back to the Babtec software and opens the Babtec action management. There, they can complete their documentation as usual. The lower section causes the standard browser of the responsible employee to open. Here, the target audience is, of course, employees who might not work with Babtec regularly. They receive an easy-to-use interface to be quickly integrated into the audit process. Here in this area, for the actions,
Katrin was already logged in, so she is taken directly to the action screen. And let's assume she wants to document first that the processing of this action has started. So she says here, let's go. And with that, this status is directly noted in the action. You can see it in progress. Next, she would like to attach the revised organizational chart she has prepared as a PDF document. So you take the PDF document here via drag and drop it within the browser. This copies the document into the SQL database, attaches it to the action and makes it available. And parallel to this document that I have addressed, I now use the free text version at this point to add a timestamp. To also assign the status, I am done, I have completed everything. To now carry out the status change of the action, a click on complete action is sufficient. Electronic signature, you can already see the green status tells me the completion of this action is recorded in the system and finalized.
Since we are operating in a web browser, but still within the company's internal network, this change and maintenance of this action result in the information being automatically updated in the audit. This means the auditor now directly sees the status that Katrin has entered here, or the results of the action that he initiated
in detail. The free text that we have added, the document that we have attached, and of course the completion of revising. These documents, we will leave the effectiveness check aside for now. That would be the second step. But I think it's enough to get an impression of how the central action management can function at this point.
To now see the results of this measure in detail again, perhaps also in report form, we access a standard report here that shows me an overview of the measures. Alternatively, I also have the option to open the deviation report again, which shows me the current deviation and has now been expanded to include the currently implemented measure, including responsibilities, status, and possibly also the effectiveness of such a measure.
Daniel, now we have moved together with you at this point in an audit. What if now this one audit is all well and good, but I want a higher level where I can look at multiple audits? How do I proceed then? What do I use?
Let's take the topic of deviation directly and consider the topic of deviation across audits. For that, we would use the evaluations that are directly provided with the audit module. Here we can access standard evaluations that, for example, present me with an overview of deviations.
I can show you that again on my computer now. I have already prepared it. There is another tab here that contains the evaluation module, which is also part of the audit module package. We provide you with standard evaluations out of the box. You don't have to do much more. And as Daniel just mentioned, he wants to focus on the deviations first. This means I call up this evaluation, which shows me the number of deviations per audit. It's simply there and available.
Do I want to take a different perspective or see this view a bit more granularly? I can access the audit fields via the pivot mode. And in this case, we could, for example, take the address field and place it on the x-axis of our evaluation. And now we divide the overview of deviations by business partner. Yeah, for example,
this list that I have here, I can now also use directly for navigation, so that here in the lower area, you can see it. I have 9 deviations that are currently occurring, not assigned to any business partner. By double-clicking on these new deviations, I get a list of the new deviations displayed. You can see here is the deviation over my organizational chart. With another double click, the system jumps directly into the audit where this deviation is located without opening the audit module, without searching directly from the evaluation into the basic data set to jump to the audit in this case.
I think we have one more. How do these deviations now affect the compliance level of my audits? My audits that I might have conducted over a certain period, we also provide a standard evaluation for this.
The special feature of this evaluation is that we have activated the pre-filter dialog. Activated means that before the system jumps into the evaluation, I can use the filter dialog to restrict which of the SOL audits stored in the database should be used for the evaluation. And there are different approaches, such as working with time periods or audit types, or also using linked article numbers, address numbers, or the statuses assigned to the audit. I'll skip that for now. I won't enter a filter and will open it directly, thus having an evaluation which pulls in all records.
Ideally, if you want to modify this evaluation further, simply save it as a favorite. Then you won't have to make the changes repeatedly. This evaluation can then also be displayed on a dashboard or on a page that provides me with an overall view of certain topics. And so I have a relatively quick and easy way to get an overall view of all ongoing audits, their level of completion, or the number of my deviations in a specific area.
You've heard the topic of dashboards mentioned several times with us now. If you want to know a bit more about it, how do dashboards work? How are dashboards integrated? Perhaps with KPIs that are determined in the audit, there is also a separate webcast, a dedicated YouTube video that you can watch on the topic of dashboards Just search for it and you'll find it.
If you liked this video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to our channel to not miss new videos, or visit the website to learn more about our products.
Thank you very much for your time and for staying with us. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.